What you're about to witness is an absolutely brilliant attacking masterpiece by one of the legends of the game of chess. So earlier today, July 21st, 2020, the Legends of Chess tournament kicked off on Chess 24. This is an online tournament, and it's the fourth leg of the Magnus Grand Chess Tour. And what's so special about this tournament is that out of the 10 participants, 6 are so-called legends, players who are only semi-active or even retired, but have been invited to this tournament to showcase their skills against the younger generation. And the first round of this tournament saw a match between two legends of the game. And in this legend matchup, we have 40-year-old Hungarian Grandmaster Peter Leko, who in his prime in the mid-2000s was the number 4 ranked player in the world. And he's up against 51-year-old Ukrainian Grandmaster Vasyl Ivanchuk, who is known throughout the chess world as one of the most creative attacking players of all time. Ivanchuk at this point is into his 4th decade of professional chess at the highest level, and he's actually been the number 2 ranked player in the world on 3 separate occasions. But being matched up against Leko in the first round is a tough test for Ivanchuk. First of all, the format of the tournament is that it's online, so these older players are just getting used to it. And second of all, creative, risk-taking sort of players always have a hard time against players who play very solidly, such as Leko. And going into this game, the score in the match was actually 2-1 in Leko's favor, meaning Ivanchuk had to win this game in order to force an Armageddon playoff to try to win the match overall. Now, before I really get into the game, I should warn you that it will get quite complicated at some points, but regardless of whether you're a complete beginner or a seasoned master, a lot can be taken away from this game. And so Ivanchuk, or Chucky as he's affectionately called by his fans, of which I'm one, opens with e4.
My preparation was okay. I will just play e4 and then we'll see.
And his opponent Leko goes for solid e5. And now, rather than go into a Ruy Lopez or an Italian standard kind of openings, Chucky reaches deep into his bag of tricks and plays f4, the King's Gambit, an ancient opening that aggressive attacking players have been playing for hundreds of years and has yielded them some pretty good results. But with defensive strategies having improved in recent years, and of course the invention of chess engines, this opening has been sort of rebuffed or considered dubious. But that doesn't stop one of the most creative players of all time from playing it. And the idea here is that you give up this pawn in order to increase your control over the center and kickstart a fast attack. And so Leko accepts the gambit by taking on f4, and Ivanchuk plays knight f3. And so here Leko plays h6, a sort of anti-King's Gambit line, in which he's preparing to play g5 to make sure that once the d-pawn moves forward, the bishop can never capture on f4. And so Ivanchuk plays d4, and we see g5. And now rather than allow the pawn to storm to g4 and harass this knight, Ivanchuk plays g3, looking to trade off the pawns. And so Leko accepts, and the pawns are traded. Now just 6 moves in, Ivanchuk is down a pawn, but in return he has a very active rook, a bishop that can quickly develop, and a lot of attacking potential on the king side. And already here, Leko has to be very careful. If he plays a slow move like d6, bishop takes g5 can be played, taking advantage of the pinned h6 pawn. Of course, if it captures the bishop, white will pick up a whole rook. So Leko, knowing this, plays bishop g7, making sure that the rook is defended. And Ivanchuk just continues his development with knight c3. We have d6, bishop e3, knight f6, and queen d2. Ivanchuk is preparing to castle queenside where his king will be safe, and he can then turn all his attention to the king side. And so Leko plays knight g4, just harassing Ivanchuk's bishop. And of course Chucky wants to hold on to his bishop for the attack that's going to come later, so he retreats it to g1, where it might look a little bit out of place, but don't worry, that bishop will make a comeback very soon. And now we have knight c6, queenside castles, and kingside castles. And now that his king is safely tucked away on c1, and he knows where his opponent's king is going to remain, Chucky can continue with his plan to invade the kingside. And he does this by first playing knight h2, trying to trade off this annoying knight on g4. And Leko accepts. Trading pieces is favorable for him because he's up material. And now we have rook takes h2. And now Leko develops his bishop with tempo attacking the rook. No problem, says Chucky, just develops it to e1. We have knight to e7. Leko is looking to redeploy his knight to potentially a defensive position should the king side really get active. And so now Chucky develops his bishop slowly. We have queen d7. And now bishop to e3, like I said. The bishop is not going to idle on g1 for long. It's now getting into the game. and also making way for the rook to come to h1. So we have knight g6, rook h1, and now Leko plays c6, looking to just fortify the center. He's thinking to maybe start pushing these pawns, launch an attack on the queen side. But Chucky, who needs to win this game, is not going to give Leko even the slightest of chances to start his own counterplay. Chucky knows what he needs to do, and he's been devising a little attacking scheme for the past couple minutes. So pause here and see if you can find the move that Chucky uses to kickstart his attack. And that attacking move is rook takes h6. Chucky gives up his rook because after bishop takes, he recaptures with his second rook, and now his rook completely dominates the h-file, and the king's defenses have been weakened. And now Leko plays king to g7, attacking the rook with the king, but now Chucky captures the second pawn. So if we review what happened over the last couple moves, Chucky gave up a rook, but in return he gained a bishop and 2 pawns, and a lot of potential for an attack on a king that is now a lot more exposed than it was a few moves ago. A pretty good trade-off if you ask me. And so Leko now needs to fortify his king before it's too late, and he plays f6, kicking the bishop back, and then playing rook to h8, looking to trade off the rooks, which would definitely take some pressure off of him. And although Chucky can't avoid this trade because the rook really has nowhere to go, he's now thinking on how he can improve his position going forward, and he does this by playing b3, so that his king has somewhere to escape to once the action starts to pick up. And so Leko takes the rook, and Chucky recaptures the bishop, giving check, and now we have king to h7. And now if we look at the position, the engine evaluates this as equal, but I believe it's a lot easier for white to play for one main fundamental chess reason: king safety. Chucky's king is going to safely tuck away on b2, while Leko's king has been stripped of practically all its pawns, and he's going to have to keep a close eye to make sure it doesn't get snuck up on. So now we have bishop to f1. Chucky is just looking to redeploy his bishop to a more active position. We have bishop h3. Leko offers a trade, and Chucky says, hell no. We have rook to e8, and now king b2. Like I said, Chucky is just slowly building in his position, making sure his king is safe before he launches the second wave of the attack. And now Leko plays b5, saying that your king can never stay fully safe while I have my pawns that I can push forward. And now we have bishop d3. Chucky finally lines up the bishop with the king, and he's starting to think of devious attacking threats. Leko responds by playing queen to g4, looking to get his queen more active and attack this pawn. And now we have bishop to e3. Chucky just recalls the bishop to solidify his center. And Chucky isn't particularly worried about his pawn on g3. He knows that it's not going to be of much use to him anyway. And so after Leko plays b4 and Chucky retreats to d1, he allows it to be taken, but now he takes the pawn on b4, ripping apart Black's queen side. Black is now left with these weak pawns on a7, c6, and d6, which the queen can clearly target. So Leko plays bishop to g4 here, trying to be active by attacking the knight. And here is the next brilliant move that Chucky plays in this game. Being the attacking player that he is, Chucky always looks for the active solution to his problem. He doesn't even waste time thinking of a passive way to defend his knight. He simply goes all in on the attack. And the move he plays here is so complicated that it really takes a while to understand. e5. It doesn't look like this move does much, especially since the knight is hanging, but really this is a very powerful move. If the knight is captured, then Chucky will unleash a crazy sequence of maneuvers with his queen, starting with queen to b7 check. And after the king moves back to h8, he will take the pawn on c6, attacking the rook. After rook moves, now queen to h1 check, attacking the king. And after the king moves, he won't take the bishop, because then his own bishop will get taken. He will rather play queen to h6, defending the bishop while attacking the knight on g6, and this is just very powerful for white. The knight is now hit twice, and it's not easy to defend it. And if he retreats, then e takes d6 will clear the way for the bishop to attack the king. And after, say, queen takes d6, bishop to c4 check will hit. If the knight blocks, then the queen will take. He's just completely overloading. If bishop to g4 to defend the knight, we would have queen to g6 check, forking the king and the bishop, and white is just completely winning. So the best move here would be, honestly, to give up the knight for a couple pawns, but even still, after pawn takes and queen takes, even though it's a check, the king will come back to c1, and there are still two powerful white bishops lined up towards black king. This is just advantage white. So Leko, of course, being a very experienced player, senses some danger, and after e5 played f5, looking to blunt the light squared bishop and prevent it from really causing any damage to the black king. But Chucky now plays queen takes d6. Again, he's allowing his knight to get captured, and Leko does capture it, but now we have bishop takes f5. And although Chucky is down a rook, he's the one that actually has the advantage and the one that has a very strong attack going. There's now a lot of pressure on this knight, and so Leko has to be very careful here. He plays rook to g8 to defend the knight, and Ivanchuk just recalls his bishop, making sure that it doesn't get taken. Leko tries to again trade the bishops, but now Ivanchuk again goes in for the kill with queen to e7 check. And after rook g7, queen g5. Putting a pin on the bishop. Of course, if bishop takes, queen takes queen. So Leko has to come up with a solution. He plays queen to h2 to at least target this bishop. And after Ivanchuk takes, he plays knight to e7. And it looks like he's going to win a piece back. Because if the queen goes to f6, then the queen will take the bishop. And if the queen goes back, queens will get traded and rook will take the light square bishop. But of course, Chucky finds the way out of this predicament and plays queen to h5 check. The queens are now traded, and now again, if we look at the position, Chucky is still down in exchange. He has two bishops for a knight and a rook, but he has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pawns against only 2 pawns for black, and this should be enough to win. And so Leko is desperately trying to create some counterplay. He plays rook to g2, and Ivanchuk now just moves his bishop to attack the knight, bishop b4, and after knight d5, he finds a way to simplify the position into an endgame he knows he can win with bishop to f3. And after rook moves, bishop takes knight, pawn recaptures, and for a very experienced player, this is a pretty easily convertible endgame. He simply plays bishop c5 to attack the pawn. Pawn goes forward, and now all he needs to do is gradually push his pawns and his king forward, and he's going to win this game. And so he begins by playing b4. We have king to g6, a4, king to f5, b5, pawns are traded, king to e6. Leko needs to get his king back in a hurry in order to stop the advancing pawns. And so he does so by playing king d7. But now here comes the white king. King to b3, king to c6. But here comes the next pawn, c4. And after pawns are traded, white has 3 whole pass pawns and a bishop, and black just has 1 measly rook to defend. It's simply not going to be enough. And so we have rook to f4. The e-pawn is moving forward quickly. Rook to e4. e7. The pawn is now 1 square away from queening, so the rook needs to stay on the e-file, and Leko decides to move his king back to d7 just to free the rook. But at this point, there's actually a very simple way to force a win in just a matter of moves, so pause and see if you can find it. So well done if you found it. You clearly have at least a little bit of endgame technique. The move is just b7. The point is that white has so many pass pawns that the king and the rook can't stop all of them at once. And after king to c7, now the next little trick move, bishop d6 check. Offering the bishop for free, but if it's captured, white will promote with a queen and be completely winning. And so Leko takes the b-pawn instead. But now the final touch to cap off an amazing victory, bishop to e5. And Leko actually resigned in this position, knowing that he can no longer stop the e-pawn from queening. The rook is now completely blockaded. It simply cannot get back in time to stop the pawn from queening. The only thing he can do to prolong the game would be to take the bishop, but after the d-pawn takes, white is going to have a queen and will checkmate in just a matter of moves. So there we go, an amazing victory from the legend Vasyl Ivanchuk to tie the match 2-2, but unfortunately it then went to an Armageddon playoff game, which he lost, but it doesn't take anything away from this amazing King's Gambit victory, winning with an opening that everyone thought was dubious, and playing countless amazing attacking moves such as that first rook sacrifice and that e5 move to open up the lines of the bishops. The man may be 51, but he's still got that attacking edge. So thanks for sticking around for the analysis. Well done if you could keep up, and hopefully we'll continue to see more amazing games from the Legends of Chess tournament.